Welcome to the MAP Talk on Tariffs, Trade, and Manufacturing in Arizona. I'm Jennifer Pullen, a Senior Research Economist in the Economic and Business Research Center at the Eller College of Management at the University of Arizona. I'll moderate today's webinar, and I think we have a great lineup of speakers for you today. So we have from the Economic and Business Research Center with us today, Beatriz del Campo Carmona and George Hammond. And we also welcome our guest speaker, Ricardo Rescon, from the Director of Marketing at Tetaquai. And I'll introduce each of our speakers at the beginning of their respective presentations. But before we do that, I'll go through a little bit of today's logistics. So all MAP Talks are recorded. So we record each MAP Talk and post them on the MAP Dashboard website. We should have it up probably by tomorrow morning. You can find it on the MAP website along with our speakers' PowerPoint presentations will be posted there. Everyone's in conference mode, meaning that you're muted except for the presenters. We'll have time for question and answers after each of the three presentations. So we ask you to submit them at the bottom of your screen into the chat or to the Q&A box. There, you can also email me questions at any time at jknipe@arizona.edu. I'll look through those questions throughout the presentations and ask them to each of our speakers towards the end. We'd like to thank our MAP sponsors. We have many community sponsors, but our sustaining sponsors include the Freeport-McMoran Foundation, New Point Marketing and Market Research, the Thomas R. Brown Family Foundation, and Tucson Electric Power. Additionally, we'd like to thank our partners, the Community Foundation for Southern Arizona, Pima Association of Governments, Southern Arizona Leadership Council, Sun Corridor Incorporated, and the University of Arizona. Without their contributions, to events like today would not be possible. We'd also like to acknowledge our media sponsor, the Arizona Daily Star. You can find MAP features in the Arizona Daily Star, typically in the first Monday in the business section, and towards the end of the month in the health section. We will report different statistics from the MAP Dashboard website on kind of what's new in the economy, what's going on in the economy, and what's going on with health-related measures. And so with that, I would like to welcome Beatriz. She can now turn on her screen. Thank you, Bea. Beatriz is a research economist in the Economic and Business Research Center at the University of Eller's College of Management. She supports and works on the MAP Dashboard and forecasting project for the center. Prior to joining EBRC, she worked as a business analyst for European investment firms and a major bank in Spain. Today, Bea will discuss how manufacturing remains key for Tucson's economy. So Bea, I'll turn off my screen and you can start your screen share.
You're using the screen, right?
Yes, Bear, we can see your screen and we're all good. You can start.
Okay. Thanks, Jennifer, for that great introduction. Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm eager to engage with today's topic. Like many metropolitan areas, Tucson economy is built of a mix of industry, including government, education, healthcare, and technology. But among these, manufacturing plays a pivotal role. Today, we will take a closer look at where the sector stands, how it compares to state and the national trends, and where it is headed in the years to come. Before we dive into the data, I want to ask a few questions to set the stage and get you thinking about Tucson and its manufacturing sector. First, how important do you think manufacturing is to Tucson economy today? When we think of Tucson, what industry comes to mind? Healthcare, education, maybe even tech or tourism? But where does manufacturing stand in the bigger picture of the economy? Now, has the role of manufacturing in the region changed over time? Tucson, like many cities, has evolved, and with it, its economic base. Manufacturing may not always be front and center, but its importance has changed over the years. Next, which specific manufacturing sector contribute the most employment opportunities in Tucson? Now let's consider manufacturing wages in Tucson. Are they higher or lower than the national average? Wages are a critical component of understanding any sector importance. And finally, how do you think manufacturing's role differs between counties like Maricopa and Pima? As we move through the data, keep this question in mind, as they will help us understand Tucson's place in the context of Arizona's manufacturing landscape. Tucson economy is diverse and anchored by a few key sectors, primarily government, trade, transportation and utilities, private education, and healthcare. But what many may not realize is the significant role manufacturing plays, especially in terms of economic output. In 2023, manufacturing accounted for 15.1% of Tucson total GDP, which is quite substantial considering it made up only 7.1% of total employment, or about 28,800 jobs in 2024. That imbalance tells us that manufacturing is a high-value sector, delivering a strong return relative to its employment footprint. Even more striking are the wages in this sector. The average wage is around $106,000 per worker, which is more than $23,000 higher than the national average. This shows that not only is manufacturing a key part of the economy, but also a high-value job sector. One of the standout industries within manufacturing is transportation equipment, which include aerospace and defense. This subsector is not only the largest, but also the highest paid, helping drive up the sector average wages. In 2024, manufacturing accounted for 28,800 jobs, or 7.1% of total employment in Tucson. As you can see in this pie chart, that position in manufacturing as the sixth largest NAICS, North American Industry Classification System, supersector, which is used by a federal agency to categorize business establishments for economic data. It ranks behind government, 19.5%, private education and health services, 17.5%, trade, transportation and utilities, 17.3%, leisure and hospitality, 11%, and professional and business services, 10.8%. In 2024, Tucson at 7.1% had a larger share of manufacturing jobs compared to the state, 6%, but a smaller share than the national, 8%. To understand how important a particular industry is to a local economy, one of the best measures we can use is gross domestic product, or GDP. GDP represents the total value of goods and services produced with a region using local labor and capital. Looking at GDP helps us understand the industrial mix of a region, showing us which sector contributes most to economic output. It also gives us insight into how vulnerable or resilient a region might be to national or global economy shifts. In 2023, 15.1% of Tucson's GDP came from the manufacturing sector, which is higher than the national average of 10.2%. That made manufacturing the third largest industry in Tucson, behind only finance activities at 20% and government at 17.2%. Another way to evaluate the relative importance of an industry in a region is using its location quotient, LQ. The LQ measures how important an industry is in a specific area compared to the national average. When the LQ is greater than 1, the region has a larger set of jobs than the national average, while a value less than 1 represents a smaller share. This map shows the manufacturing LQ across several Arizona counties. Pinal County has an LQ of 1.1, meaning it has a stronger concentration of manufacturing jobs than the state overall. Pima and Gila counties also have higher manufacturing LQs compared to Maricopa County, which include Phoenix. These differences show how the importance of manufacturing varies by regions. By March 2025, Arizona has added 35,600 new manufacturing jobs since the beginning of 2015. That was a 22.5% increase in manufacturing employment in just under 10 years. Nationally, manufacturing employment grew by just 4.1% during the same time frame. From 2016 to 2023, Tucson's manufacturing industry faced more challenges than the national average. The biggest hit came during the COVID-19 recession between 2019 and 2020. Tucson's manufacturing employment dropped by 7%, reflecting the industry's vulnerability during that time. In the following year, both Tucson and the US began to recover. The US rebounded more strongly with a 6.6% increase in manufacturing employment, while Tucson saw a smaller but positive gain of 3.4%. By 2023, Tucson saw modest growth with a 0.2% increase, while the national overall experienced a 2.7% decline, indicating some relative resilience in Tucson compared to national trends that year. Now I want to tell you about wages per worker in the US and Tucson. In 2023, manufacturing played a major role in Tucson's GDP. This was largely because manufacturing jobs offer significantly higher wages compared to other sectors. This table shows wages per worker across the major industry sectors, what we call Nike supersector, for both Tucson and the US. Overall, workers in Tucson earn much less than the national average, about $15,000 lower, which is a 20.9% gap. But manufacturing stands out. It had the highest wages per worker in Tucson, around $106,000. That's more than $23,000 higher than the national average for manufacturing. In fact, in 2023, only two sectors in Tucson had wages above the national average: manufacturing and natural resources and mining. Manufacturing in Tucson spans many sub-industries, so to get a better picture, we have broken down using 3-digit NICE codes. This table highlights which sectors are driving both job numbers and wages. In 2023, transportation equipment manufacturing, which includes aerospace and defense, was the top employer, with over 13,000 jobs. This was followed by computer and electronic product, with just over 3,200 jobs, and fabricated metals, with about 2,763 jobs. Other important sectors include machinery manufacturing and miscellaneous manufacturing, each with more than 1,000 jobs. When it comes to wages, the top three highest paying sectors were transportation equipment, computer and electronic products, and machinery. This industry not only offered the most opportunities, but also the most competitive pay in the local manufacturing landscape. The future is now for manufacturing growth. Manufacturing plays a large role in Arizona's economy, job creation, and technological progress. State manufacturing activity and jobs are expected to grow during the next few years. A major driver of that growth is new investments in chip production, TSMC and Intel in Arizona, along with the co-location of some part of the supply chain. A major highlight for Tucson manufacturing sector is the American Battery Factory, or ABF. Construction is already underway on a massive 2 million square foot gigafactory. With a capital investment of $1.2 billion, this project is expected to generate 1,000 new jobs and will play a role in developing Arizona's clean energy economy. The first phase of the facility is targeted for completion by 2025, so this is a near-term development with big long-term implications. The MAP dashboard will continue to track these trends, providing timely and reliable data on manufacturing employment. This ensures we stay informed with up-to-date insight as the sector evolves. Thank you for your time and for joining me in this important topic.
Thank you, Bea. That was a great overview of the manufacturing industry in Tucson and Arizona. If you are interested in learning more, I'm going to share a link to an article that Bayer wrote on this topic that we published on the MAP dashboard. I'll share that link in the chat in just a few moments. Now I'd like to welcome George Hammond. Dr. George Hammond, he's the director of the Economic and Business Research Center at the University of Arizona, and he's going in the Eller College of Management. He's going to talk with us today about tariffs and Arizona's trade with Mexico. Welcome, George.
Thanks, Jennifer. And thank you, all of you, for joining us today. Just a quick reminder that if you have questions for any of us presenting here today, please feel free to enter those questions into the chat or the Q&A, and we'll save time to answer those at the end. So let me share my screen. Okay. So the topic of the day these days is tariffs. So I thought I would start off by talking a little bit about the major risks to the economy, and then kind of zoom in on what the impact of tariffs is, and an overall review of Arizona's role in trade. So let's jump in and talk about that. So really the major risk to the economy this year and certainly through the beginning of next year is economic policy uncertainty. And that matters for overall economic growth and economic performance because large business and consumer purchases depend on views about the future, including the future of economic policy. And one thing that economists have noticed is that when there is significant uncertainty about economic policy, then businesses and consumers tend to hold back, and they tend to not make big investments in the context of business purchases, and not buy as many cars and homes in the context of consumer purchases. So uncertainty is generally problematic for an economy, and when we face elevated levels of uncertainty, that tends to mean slower overall economic growth. So one source of that uncertainty that we're seeing these days is certainly what's going on with tariffs. But tariffs have an independent impact on overall growth. So tariffs are taxes. Tariffs are paid by importers, meaning that those taxes are remitted to the federal government by the importers of the goods. But the tax burden, which is a more nuanced concept, that may vary broadly across products and industries. So the actual burden of the tariff is split between the importer, meaning the US, and the exporter, meaning whoever we're importing from. And even further down the line, businesses and consumers also can share part of that overall tax burden. And we can't say, ahead of time exactly what that sharing will look like. In some products and industries, the importers in the US will face more of that burden, and that burden may fall more on consumers. In other products and industries, the burden may fall more on exporters to the US and more on firms. And so overall, we can't say for particular products or industries beforehand without quite a bit of empirical work how that will actually work out. But one thing that we can say is that on average, when we're facing really broad-based tariffs and a really significant increase in tariffs, such as we've just seen, that there will be significant burdens on businesses and consumers in the US. So the current tariff levels are a significant increase in taxes on consumers and businesses. So this is a big loss of economic freedom and a big blow to free markets. Now, mass deportations are also something that we're going to want to keep an eye on. And that's because overall labor markets, both nationally and in Arizona, are very tight at the moment. We have low unemployment for the prime working age individuals. We have relatively high labor force participation rates, near all-time highs. And that means that in that sort of situation, if we start deporting large numbers of undocumented immigrants, that's going to create and exacerbate labor shortages, thus creating supply chain disruptions and probably driving significant increases in prices if we're lucky, or outright shortages of the goods and services that we're looking to buy. We're also seeing activity through DOGE to cut federal spending and cut federal jobs. Overall, reduced federal purchases of goods and services and reduced federal employment will put downward pressure on economic activity, certainly in the short run. So these are all major risks, at least as I see it at the moment, to the economy. Now, I've argued that uncertainty is significantly elevated, and one of the ways that economists track this these days is through a data set put together by three economists, Baker, Bloom, and Davis. It's a published piece of research. You can Google that citation at the top of the page and get a quick description of how they're measuring uncertainty. But essentially, they're looking about how much uncertainty is mentioned in the media. It's generally not much more complicated than that. Where we're at in terms of economic policy uncertainty at the moment is as high as we've seen it since the COVID pandemic began. So uncertainty is a real factor that influences economic decision making, both by firms and consumers, and that economic policy is significantly elevated. And that on its own can put downward pressure on overall economic growth. The tariffs also impact the economy, and we've seen a huge increase in tariffs. Now, this is just one source of the US average effective tariff rate. This comes from the Budget Lab at Yale. You could just Google the Budget Lab, and that will take you there, and you can read some of the details of this. But this gives you a basic feel for how much the average effective tariff rate has increased. It went from roughly 2.4% before the Trump announcement in early April, up to, as of April 15th, about 28%. That 28% number assumes that individuals don't respond to the increase in tariffs by reallocating their consumption to other goods, which are perhaps subject to lower tariffs, or making other substitutions. The 18% average tariff rate is the Budget Lab's estimate of where the average tariff will land after individuals substitute away from the high tariff goods towards goods that are facing lower tariffs. Either way, you slice it, it's a huge increase in the tariff rate, something that we haven't seen in at least 80 years and perhaps more. So tariffs are up significantly. This is just a quick slide to give you a quick feel for where tariffs stand at the moment. Of course, this is changing more or less day by day, but that's where things stand at the moment across tariffs, and I'll leave that mostly for reference, and Jennifer will post PDFs of all the slides that you're going to see today once we post a recording of the event. So tariffs will widely impact and adversely impact the economy. Now, Arizona will feel the impact of tariffs overall, but will feel the impact of tariffs on Mexico more than most states. So Arizona ranked 31st in the nation in terms of the importance of international trade. So that's summing our exports to the world and our imports from the world as a share of GDP. That's about 12.3%. That ranks us 31st in the nation, so a bit below the median. But in terms of our trade relationship with Mexico, since Mexico is by far our most important trading partner, Arizona ranks much higher. So we're sixth in the nation in terms of the importance of trade. Again, imports plus exports. And that accounts for 3.8% of Arizona's GDP. Now, in addition to that sort of direct impact, tariffs impact consumer activity because tariffs result as taxes result in lower after-tax income for households, meaning less consumer spending, and higher costs for businesses who are importing intermediate inputs. And those higher business costs then either get translated into higher prices for the resulting goods or lower profits for firms. And it generally tends to force some firms out of business. And we are seeing some news reports suggesting that that is something that we're seeing. Overall, in terms of aggregate inflation, generally tariffs are expected to generate a short-run burst of inflation followed by higher price levels that linger. Overall, the Budget Lab is expecting, about an increase in inflation from, somewhere around 2.5% currently, up to around 4.5 to 5.5% over the next year or so. But as we've all learned, based on the huge inflation that we saw during the summer of 2022, that when we get a burst of inflation, those higher price levels tend to linger for long periods of time, adversely impacting households' overall cost of living. So, while the inflation resulting from tariffs will be temporary, the higher prices are going to linger and probably be with us permanently. So one of the justifications that you hear for tariffs is that it will bring manufacturing back to the US. And there's a kernel of truth to that. Tariffs may incentivize capital investment in the US, resulting in increased manufacturing output. But this takes time and it takes certainty, right? Firms are not going to make major, billion-dollar investments or, $100 million investments or even $50 million investments in manufacturing in the US unless they believe that the current policy environment is going to be stable for longer than a year or longer than even 3 years or 5 years. Businesses need stability in the policy environment in order to make these long-term investments. But even given that, if we do see firms making these investments in manufacturing output in the US, I would argue that we probably won't see a large boom in manufacturing jobs because when firms make these new investments in manufacturing capacity, they tend to do so at the state of the art in technology, and that means highly automated facilities. So we may not see as many jobs as we might hope from the increased manufacturing investment, if indeed that does happen. Now, tariffs, other things constant or other things the same, do tend to raise the value of the US dollar. And the reason that happens is it arises from a narrow view of the influences on the value of the dollar, right? Trade depends on US dollars. So think about the way an importer in the US buys, say, a car from Germany. In order to do that, the US importer will need to take dollars to the foreign exchange market and sell them for euros, and then they can use those euros to buy a German vehicle and bring that vehicle back to the US. Now, overall, if imports are falling because of the impact of tariffs, then US importers are selling fewer dollars for a given level of dollar demand or the demand for dollars. Selling fewer dollars means that the value of the US dollar will rise. So it's in that narrow sense that we say that tariffs tend to raise the value of the dollar, other things the same. So we're really focusing on kind of that transactions need for dollars. Now, if that happens, the rise in the value of the dollar tends to offset some of the price and inflation impact of tariffs. but it also tends to hurt exports of US goods and services abroad, and including those produced in Arizona. And of course, retaliatory tariffs. If our trading partners respond to our tariffs by raising their own tariffs, that would tend to hurt US exporters, again, including those in Arizona. So what are we seeing in terms of the US dollar exchange rate? Well, we've seen the broad US dollar index fall recently, which should seem puzzling. We've just argued that the impact of tariffs can raise the value of the dollar. So why is the dollar falling? Well, the dollar is falling because there are many other impacts on the value of the dollar. The value of the dollar is fundamentally determined by the demand for dollars and the supply of dollars. And trade, this kind of transactions use of dollars in the foreign exchange market, is just one of the influences on the supply and demand for dollars. Other influences come from financial markets, based on relative interest rate differences, can be influenced by expected changes in expected rates of inflation in the US relative to other countries. And finally, it can be influenced by changes in the portfolio preferences of governments and private organizations around the world, which hold dollars for a wide variety of reasons. For whatever reason, they've decided to rebalance their portfolios so that their portfolios contain fewer dollars, and that seems to be part of what's happening right now. That can significantly increase the supply of dollars and drive the value of the dollar down. So the information on the previous slide about tariffs and the dollar, that is true, but it's true holding other things the same, and those other things are all of these other influences on the foreign exchange value of the US dollar. So let's talk a little bit about Arizona's role in international trade. Now, these data come from the US Census Bureau via USA Trade and via our Arizona-Mexico Economic Indicators website. So Arizona merchandise imports, so these are imports only of tangible goods, not imports of services like travel and tourism and other imports of services. These are just tangible things. In 2024, the Census Bureau estimates that Arizona imported about $42 billion worth of goods from around the world. We import from countries around the world and regions. So by our largest source of imports in 2024 was from Asia, so China, Japan, Taiwan. North America, meaning in this case, Canada and Mexico, is the next largest, and then Europe at 15.4% is the third largest. The table that you see here gives the breakout for the top 10 countries. And as you can see, Mexico is by far Arizona's largest source of imports, counts for about 27.5% of our imports from the world. That's a much bigger share of the overall import picture than we see for the US, which is just 15.5%. So for Arizona, Mexico is a much more important source of imported goods, at least as far as we can tell from these data. This slide gives you a feel for what we're importing from Mexico and then from China. Arizona's largest import sector is agricultural products. So think of that as fresh produce coming in from Mexico, and that includes tomatoes, cucumbers, peppers, even grapes coming across the border into Arizona and into the US more broadly. Next up are basically computer and electronic components. And third is transportation equipment. And here, think auto and aircraft parts. From China, the mix of imports is different. It's really electronic components that are by far the biggest imports from China. So let's talk about our exports. So these are exports from Arizona to the rest of the world. Our major export market is North America, again, Canada and Mexico, followed by Asia and then Europe. Among countries, just like it was for imports, Mexico is by far the most important destination for state exports at almost 28%. It's a much more important trading partner than it is nationally at 16.2%. What do we export to Mexico? Again, it's computer and electronic products and electrical equipment, so those electronic components. Minerals and ores, that's mainly copper, is also very important. And then transportation, again, those auto and aircraft parts are near the top. From China, it's again electrical and electronic products and transportation equipment are major exports. Now, within our trade to Mexico and Canada, Arizona and the U.S. are part of the shared production system. So, in terms of electrical components and auto and aircraft parts, these are parts that are flowing across the border, typically multiple times as those products are assembled and completed. And we've estimated over the years that some of these products are crossing the border as many as 6 or 7 times. So that shared production system is really important, particularly for the automotive sector. So what are the main takeaways today? First of all, the U.S. and Arizona faced increased risks of recession. Increased policy uncertainty is by far the biggest risk to the economy this year. Tariffs will add to that risk. Tariffs will adversely affect the economy because tariffs are taxes that reduce after-tax household income and raise business costs. Increased tariffs on Mexico will have a disproportionate impact on Arizona compared to other states because Mexico is by far our most important trading partner. So overall, to repeat myself and to complete the slide, so Mexico is again our most important trading partner. But you want to keep in mind that we trade with many countries around the world, including those in Europe and in Asia. So with that, I will stop my screen share and turn it back to Jennifer.
Thanks, George. If you're interested in learning more about what George spoke about today, I'll post a link to an article that he wrote recently for the MAP dashboard on tariffs and trade with Mexico. We're now excited to have our guest speaker, Ricardo Rascon, the Director of Marketing at Tetecwai, joining us today. Tetecwai is the largest privately owned employer in the state of Sonora. Over the past 12 years, Ricardo has helped manufacturers from around the world develop and implement strategies to successfully launch and grow operations in Mexico. His work focuses on guiding companies through critical decisions related to site selection, labor access, and operational planning within Tetecwai's integrated campus model. Welcome, Ricardo. We're really pleased that you're able to join us today.
Thank you, Jennifer, and thank you, George, Beatriz, the entire MAP team, and everyone here taking time out of their day to listen to us. Really appreciate your time. So as Jennifer mentioned, my name is Ricardo, Director of Marketing at Tetecwai. We're headquartered here in Tucson, Arizona, but the majority of what we do is in Mexico, where we own and operate manufacturing campuses that typically are going to provide foreign manufacturers with the quickest, most cost-effective, and risk-averse way to establish their own manufacturing presence. So as mentioned, headquartered here, but most of what we do is in Mexico, where we have about 24,000 employees. 18,000 of those employees are in Sonora, so right under us here in Tucson, where we're the largest privately owned employer. Across our different manufacturing campuses, we own and operate about 6.5 million square feet of industrial space, and we currently support about 75 manufacturing clients of all shapes and sizes across all industries, from aerospace, automotive, medical devices, electronics, to some niche industries like sporting goods and furniture as well. Within Tetecwai, we also have a broader group of companies Intugo is one. They provide a similar set of services, but more focused on call centers and back office support type roles. So whether you need to set up a call center of 50 people or hire one graphic designer, Intugo can help you do that in Mexico. ILS is another company within the group. They're a 3PL. They have a warehouse here in Tucson as well. Denisa is the developer of our different manufacturing campuses. And FGI is the newest group within the company, and they specialize in equipment financing. When companies think about expanding into Mexico, typically one of the biggest surprises that they face is that although they may have great relationships with US lenders, once those lenders realize that those assets are going to be in Mexico, the interest rates get jacked up quite a bit. So FGI kind of helps solve some of those issues. So that's a little bit about Tetakawi. And so why Mexico? Why would a company reach out to Tetakawi and say, hey, I'm interested in seeing how you can help me out? There's a lot of reasons, some which are under a microscope right now, given all the tariffs that George just explained. But the number one reason is typically cost efficiency. And again, this has evolved. When I first started working at Tetakawi 12 years ago, that was always the number one reason. Companies would say, I need to reduce my costs. And I could do that in Mexico. And typically, the number that we see, if you look at a fully fringed wage of an employee in the US, typically in Mexico, that savings is going to be around $25,000 per employee. And that's a fully fringed wage. The second most common reason is just strategic location. If you need to sell into North America, this is an advantageous place to do that. The third, which is under a lot of scrutiny, is trade and market access. Mexico has 12 plus free trade agreements with access to over 50 countries in the world. The most important is obviously USMCA, and that's a primary driver for interest in Mexico as well. I would say over the last 5 years, the number one reason companies reach out to us is because of the workforce. There's obviously constraints in the US workforce here. I think the National Association of Manufacturers said as of February of 2025, there were just under 500,000 vacancies in the manufacturing sector across the US. And in Mexico, you have very favorable demographics. We're graduating close to 120,000 engineers a year, which is almost the same amount as the US, which is pretty surprising when you consider that the US has about twice the population as Mexico. Mexico also has a very young workforce. When we look across our 24,000 employees, our average age is around 34 years old. And Mexico's workforce is getting about 1 million new entrants into the working cohort every year. Whereas here in the US, we have more people retiring each year than entering the new workforce. So Mexico obviously has a lot of advantages, some that are under increased scrutiny, and we'll get to that later. But the biggest thing preventing companies from success in Mexico is execution. And that's where a company like Tatakawi comes in. So as I mentioned, we own and operate these manufacturing campuses. I know that's a bit of a word salad when you think about it. So what is it that we do? At the end of the day, we're not a consultant. We're not the company you come to for a market analysis. We're also not a contract manufacturer. If you need 10,000 units of a specific product manufactured, we're not the company that's going to help you do that. But if you are a vertically integrated company, and you're looking to take advantage of everything that Mexico has to offer without the headaches, that's where our manufacturing campuses really shine. Think of it as an all-inclusive hotel, but for manufacturing in Mexico. So we build out all the infrastructure, all the services, all the amenities in industrial parks. And a company comes to us and they say, hey, Ricardo, I need to manufacture, components for aerospace engines. I need 35,000 square feet. I need 50 employees. We lease them the space in these communities. We recruit and hire all the people that they need. We give them immediate access to all the certifications that are necessary to operate in Mexico. And then we essentially give them keys to the building. And we say, hey, we know nothing about manufacturing aerospace components. We just know how to administer businesses in Mexico. So whatever goes on inside of those four walls, is your responsibility. And in the meantime, we'll continue to handle all aspects of HR, import-export administration, environmental health and safety, purchasing, accounting, compliance, etc. So the benefit of this is you have one partner, you have one contract, and it's with the U.S. company, and we're able to mitigate a lot of surprises. So I would say if I were to reduce our value proposition to three kind of numbers, I would say the number one is speed. So typically, we can help a company start producing products in Mexico in as little as 30 days. The second is going to be overhead savings. So on average, we're able to help reduce your overhead savings in Mexico by about 30% compared to if you were going to operate in Mexico on your own. And then the third is risk. At the end of the day, we're a risk-sharing partner. The way we're structured, our clients do not have to form their own legal entities in Mexico. We're the employer of record, the importer of record, the exporter of record. So if things go wrong, the Mexican government is coming to Tetacawi for questions, and we're the ones that ultimately have to answer that. So as you could imagine, this business model is attractive to companies of all shapes and sizes. The large multinationals like it because of the risk sharing aspects. The SMEs like it because of the economies of scale. So whether you're looking to hire 30 people in Mexico or 3,000, you're able to tap into the same infrastructure, services, and knowledge that is propelling Fortune 100 companies like GE, Medtronic, TE Connectivity to be successful in Mexico today. And so, as I mentioned, we're headquartered here in Tucson. We have 5 of these manufacturing communities throughout Mexico. 3 of them are in Sonora. 1 of them is in Saltillo, Coahuila, and our newest one is in Mazatlan, Sinaloa. And just to visualize them a little more, this is what they look like. This is our flagship manufacturing community. So in here, we have about 30 clients, about 13,000 employees in this one alone. We have sports facilities, we have on-site medical centers. All the services take place in these buildings here. We even have a daycare. We coordinate all the employee transportation. And at the end of the day, we keep on improving these campuses over time to ensure that we're able to provide our customers with operational predictability in Mexico. This is our community in Saltillo. This is our community in Guaymas, Sonora, which is home to one of the largest concentrations of aerospace engine component manufacturers. This is a rendering of our newest manufacturing community in Mazatlan, and this is our manufacturing community in Hermosillo, Sonora. So that's a little bit about Tetacawi and how we help companies. And as George mentioned, there's a lot going on right now with tariffs. So as you could imagine, because of this uncertainty, a lot of activity in Mexico right now is paused. And so the purpose of this slide here is, just to kind of explain and help you visualize exactly what is impacting Mexico today. What tariffs are actually in place today, because there's also a lot of evolving things and changing things, but this is kind of a window into what our clients are currently facing. So the first is the 25% tariff that went into effect March 4th. And who is that affecting in our client base right now? I would say our clients that aren't able to specify whether or not their products qualify under USMCA. So if you have a product that you're manufacturing in Mexico that in the eyes of US Customs doesn't undergo significant transformation and therefore doesn't qualify for the regional value content requirements of USMCA, you're getting hit with a 25% tariff. I could say, looking at our client base, most of them are not being impacted by this one today. There are some exclusions, mostly business to consumer facing companies. They're experiencing more of a struggle with that. But other than that, not too much of an impact. On top of that, we have steel and aluminum tariffs that go into place as well. Those were effective March 12th. And those are impacting some of our clients in the automotive side, other clients as well. Our aerospace clients, for the most part, are unaffected by those. Again, where we're seeing the biggest impact of the steel and aluminum tariffs is in our business to consumer facing companies. So whether you're manufacturing sporting goods or home goods or consumer electronics that use steel, aluminum components from Asia, Korea, other countries, that's where we're seeing the biggest issues at the present moment. I would say the fourth here is what we see being more of a concern, and those are the tariffs on automotive vehicles and parts. So effective March 3rd, if a vehicle assembled in Mexico qualifies under USMCA, the vehicle is still subject to tariffs, just not the U.S. portion. So say a Ford Maverick that's assembled in Hermosillo, Sonora, for instance. And I'm just using that as an example. I don't know the specifics of their case, but you would take the exported value of the vehicle, you would pull out the U.S. portion, and then you would apply a 25% tariff to whatever is not U.S. Origin. Where it gets tricky is if the vehicle is assembled in Mexico but does not qualify under USMCA. So a good example of this is like the Audi Q5, which is assembled in Tlaxcala, Mexico, central Mexico near Puebla, Mexico City. So in their case, the vehicle is assembled in Mexico, but it doesn't qualify under USMCA. It doesn't meet the 75% regional value content requirement. So because of that, the entire vehicle value of the vehicle is hit by a 25% tariff, and that would even hit the US content of the vehicle as well. So effective May 3rd, then there's going to be a treatment of the 25% tariff on auto parts as well. So as George mentioned, there's a lot of trade with automotive auto parts. So let's look at like an assembly plant. If we want to talk about Arizona, let's look at like Lucid Motors that assembles vehicles here. They have some suppliers in Sonora, depending on how the U.S. government chooses to treat those automotive parts. The explanation isn't very clear yet, nor is the mechanism. It's possible that each of those parts coming from Mexico would be hit with the tariff. So even though the vehicle is assembled here in the US, it would still be impacted by this. So that's the effect of kind of US tariffs on Mexico right now and what we're seeing with our client base. On top of that, last year, Mexico implemented some kind of tariffs and changes of their own that we see affecting companies on the Mexican side of the border as well. The first is a tariff on, country imports. It impacts about 544 product types, anything from steel, apparel, electronics. And the goal here, this went into effect of April of 2024, actually exactly a year ago today, was to protect national industries. So where we see this most impacted is, again, a lot of the kind of consumer, direct-to-consumer products. So let's use blinds as an example. Say you're assembling blinds in Mexico. Prior to this, you were able to bring in the steel, a lot of the textiles into Mexico duty-free, then go to US Customs and say, hey, although I'm bringing these things in from Asia, there's still significant transformation taking place. So this qualifies under USMCA. Now it doesn't quite work like that. So upon importing some of the steel, let's say you're bringing that in from China, textiles from China, Mexico is going to assess a tariff anywhere between 5 to 50%. And then on top of that, once you go to export it to the US, the finished product, it may be that it no longer qualifies under USMCA. And then the last item here just happens to do with the EMEX program, which is unique to Mexico, and some changes they made with respect to textile imports. So prior to December 20th, most textile imports with the proper certifications could enter Mexico and they would be exempt from a value-added tax of about 16%. Now you could continue to bring in some of these textiles to Mexico, but the value-added tax is assessed. So there's some cash flow implications that take place there. So again, the purpose of this slide is just to attempt to provide kind of a clear window into what is actually impacting Mexico right now. These first four happen to do with U.S. strategies. these last two have to do with Mexican strategies to protect national industries. But as you can imagine, and as George alluded to, this creates a lot of uncertainty. So what is it that Tatakawi is seeing today as a respect of everything that's going on? So I wanted to kind of segment this into three markets. The first is existing clients. So as I mentioned earlier, we have about 75 existing manufacturing clients in Mexico that we support. And at first, when all of this happened, there was a desire to be very reactionary, and there was some scares. We're closing down, and we're moving to the U.S., and or we're doing this and we're doing that. But over time, as they started to see that there is no certainty and things really are being handled on a day-by-day basis, we see a lot of our clients waiting a little more patiently to see how things play out. Even if they did want to make a move, labor becomes an issue in the U.S. And again, a lot of these companies have been operating with us for, on average, about 17 and a half years. So there's a lot of institutional knowledge that exists in Mexico. So even if you were to, the economics made sense to move that factory back to the U.S., from a long run competitive advantage perspective, you would be losing a lot of institutional knowledge. I would say the segment of our client base that is most likely to see a reduction in workforce and output is the automotive industry. Just as we look at a lot of the underlying economics that are taking place, downward looking consumer confidence, are as many people going to be buying vehicles? Does it make sense to manufacture a bunch of vehicles that are going to be sitting on the lots? Probably not. So that's kind of the client base that we see most susceptible to some workforce reductions. I wouldn't say closing factories, but certainly reducing the size of their current headcount. Again, I would say our business to consumer companies are most exposed right now. They're dealing with what's happening with U.S. tariffs, what's happening with Mexican tariffs. They already had small margins, and now they have to worry about consumer confidence as well. So again, none of them are leaving Mexico due to tariffs. We actually have some clients that are expanding due to labor availability. And so the second segment of customers that we look at is re-engaged prospects. So prospects that were already in our pipeline that say they reached out to us in early 2024. They wanted to explore the possibility of setting up factories in Mexico. Post-election, a lot of those conversations paused. I would say once the retaliatory tariffs were announced April 9th and then quickly paused, a lot of those conversations picked up. And I would say labor availability is the primary driver. I mean, we signed a client last week, which we were a little surprised about. Who would decide to set up a factory in any country right now, given the uncertainty? But them strategically, they saw it as an opportunity to buy really low. They had a lot of leverage in terms of finding the right real estate deal. They have premier access to some of the top talent in Mexico. So they saw it as something being more strategic. And at the end of the day, it wasn't about closing a factory in the US. It was taking a product line that had, very small margins and moving it to Mexico in a place to give that cash cow a little more time to bear fruit. And again, as I mentioned earlier, with a lot of these re-engaged prospects, labor is the issue, not necessarily tariffs, cost. It's about, if it's already hard for me to find workers here in the US, once there is a big reshoring movement, is it going to be harder? And I'm already competing with the Hobby Lobbies of the world and the McDonald's of the world. Once, Apple starts setting up a big factory next door, or NVIDIA, how am I going to compete with those companies? And to them, Mexico seems like a long tail solution to that. So the third segment of conversations, I would say, is net new prospects. So companies who have come in over the course of the last 2 months. What are we seeing there? I would say over the last 2 weeks, we've had a lot of outreach from Chinese companies. So Chinese-based manufacturers who are saying, well, I still need to sell into the US. I'm getting pressure from US brands saying they still need me to produce their products. I just have to do it elsewhere. And to them, Mexico seems like an obvious choice. I would say the second type of company that we're seeing a lot of inquiries for right now is companies that are looking for contract manufacturing. So companies who 30 years ago looked at their value chain and said, when it comes to production, I'm going to outsource that to China. I'm going to focus on design, sales, marketing, distribution. And now they're kind of, in a difficult situation where, they're a US brand, strong brand. Uh, they don't have any manufacturing knowledge in-house. And a lot of that has been outsourced to China. And now they're looking to Mexico and they're looking for a substitute solution. And they say, hey, I just need someone to make these products for me. But Mexico isn't quite structured like China. It's not as vertically integrated. So they're running into a lot of challenges. So I would say for that segment of the market, they're looking at Mexico, they're kicking tires, they're looking at the US, they're kicking tires, but ultimately the China value proposition, even with tariffs over the short run, is still what's gonna, move their businesses forward. Over the long run, could they make a change? Yes, but it requires certainty. And as George mentioned, right now, certainty is a luxury that just doesn't exist. So when it comes to companies that are more in our ideal customer profile, uh, they're certainly interested in Mexico. They're continuing to have conversations. Like I said, one signed last week. But what we're seeing in the marketplace right now is that most capital investment is paused, and that's pretty true across the aerospace industry, medical device industry, automotive, of course. So just a lot of uncertainty at the end of the day. But at Tatakawi, what we really believe is that Mexico will continue to be a strong partner to the U.S. and to Arizona specifically because of the labor availability and motivation. And again, it's not just about costs. Last week we were in Dallas in a workshop, and a company came to us, and they welding is the primary job function that they were looking for. And they're starting off welders with zero experience in the Dallas Metroplex area there at about $27 an hour, and their time to fill those positions is about 45 days. In Mexico, you could get it at a lot more affordable rate, but these are more desirable jobs, and that's kind of why we think Mexico will continue to be, again, a strong partner despite all this uncertainty. We do think time needs to pass before we see interest like we did, 2-3 years ago. But we're confident that things will move in the right direction over time. So that's all that I have today.
Thank you, Ricardo. It was great for you to share kind of what Tetakawi is doing and the value it brings to companies, and then your perspective on how tariffs are impacting manufacturing in Mexico. Thank you. So now we'll
Thank you.
start question and answer session. And if you have any questions, please put them in that Q&A chat box at the bottom. And so we'll start kind of Bea and George, a combined question for you. And that is, the growth of manufacturing relies on water and energy, among other resources. Does Arizona have enough of these resources to cover this increasing demand of water and energy?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, there are constraints on the resources that we have. But I think that there is significant water resources, significant energy resources. The question is who will use them and for what purpose and at what price. As we've all learned over the past couple of years, most of the water in Arizona goes to agriculture. If manufacturing were to take off in a significant way going forward, in a way that really needed those water resources, then that would be an issue in terms of locating those water resources and perhaps reallocating them, perhaps paying more for those water resources. So, resource allocation, particularly the whatever's the scarce resource of the moment, whether it's labor or waters or energy, is always an issue. But these are issues that have come up in the past, and they'll come up in the future. But I'm confident that we'll based on what I'm hearing around the state, that we'll find a solution that works.
Thanks, George. I also added a link, just some general information that we provide on the MAP dashboard on energy use, and we recently added we recently added a new indicator within that energy use that looks at kind of electricity and how it's being generated, and we can look at the long-term trend of renewable over time. And so that, can provide you some insight in how energy has changed within Arizona over time, and our reliance on renewable sources has increased. And I'm also going to post an article with just some general information, not completely specific to manufacturing, but it does look at Arizona's use of water by source. And so you can look at one, where we're getting the water from, and then, is it going to industry, residential, and manufacturing, at least that large component. And I'll share that in the chat box as well. So just some more basic information on energy and water use in Arizona. But a second question that I'll ask to George is, do you have any information on how the battery factory being built will influence the impact of tariffs in Arizona?
Yeah, I know Bea has some perspectives on this. The thing that I will be curious to see, and I don't have information one way or the other on the American battery factory, is the extent to which their business model relies on imports from China for rare earth materials and other battery components in order to do their manufacturing. So we don't know that yet, and I'm sure if they do have exposure to imports from China, I'm sure they're working on solutions to that. But that will be a question for battery manufacturers, auto manufacturers, really anybody. It can also affect defense production. So these negotiations that we're seeing between the U.S. and China are very high stakes, and we'll just have to see how that plays out, and we'll have to see the extent to which the supply lines on the either American battery factory or others in Arizona that use these high-tech materials, the extent to which they're exposed to risks from China. So it's something that we'll just have to keep an eye on.
Great, thanks, George. We'll switch gears for a second. And Ricardo, there's a question about would they be willing to open manufacturing campuses in Arizona? And would that make business sense for your group?
Yeah, definitely. And it's something we've considered. About 7 years ago, we embarked in a strategy to grow the business. And we said, hey, let's set up another manufacturing campus. And the US was a possibility. And obviously, Arizona was at the top of the list. But when we look at the kind of fundamental problems that our manufacturing campus solves, one of the biggest is the bureaucracy that exists in Mexico. There's a lot of advantages, but it's a hard country to do business in. So say Tetacawi didn't exist, and there was a building that was available for you to lease, and you wanted to manufacture there and take advantage of all the export programs that Mexico has to offer, just to get the certifications necessary for it to make business sense, it would take you anywhere between 8 to 12 months. When you operate with Tetacawi, you get access to those immediately. The biggest challenge is making modifications to your building and or bringing in equipment and raw materials. Other than that, we can deploy new factories instantly. In the case of the U.S. and Arizona, it's not as challenging to do business, and I think that's one of the great reasons why we're such a strong country. Is things could always be better, but it's a pretty frictionless problem, and it's easy to kind of parse together different service providers, because that's the other benefit of our model is we have all these services in house. But if you want to do this in the U.S. and you're foreign to the U.S., you could hire a PEO. There's software like ADP that's going to make your payroll very easy. And so we started thinking about it, and we said it would be hard for us to really configure something that is strategically adjacent that would provide value to the greater marketplace. And the more we thought about it, it would just be an industrial park, and there's plenty of money in that, in setting up business parks that don't have the on-site services and amenities like we do in Mexico. But that's a market where there's already strong players. So it could make sense eventually, but at the moment, not something that we could at least envision how we would provide value in a way that's mutually beneficial to our shareholders, but also to our customers.
Thank you, Ricardo. George, I have one final question for you, and that is Arizona able to substitute Mexico imports of agricultural products?
Yeah, good question. Sure. We're all thinking about where we're going to get our avocados from these days. And the answer for agriculture is somewhat similar to the answer for any sector. Yeah, to the extent that the tariffs apply to the imports of fresh produce, they create the incentive to move that production to Arizona and other parts of the U.S. That's a consideration for the long run, and whether how competitive Arizona is there depends on the land that's not currently occupied that's for agricultural production that can be used for that purpose. There are questions about water and other resources being available here in Arizona. Um, uh, so that in the short run, it's hard to do that, right? It takes a while to grow an avocado tree. And if you're trying to do that, no matter where you're trying to do it, some of the other products maybe can be done in a season, but we're all getting hit with these tariffs to the extent they apply to agricultural products right now. So that's one of the reasons why the inflation impacts die out over time, is that we get these supply constraints that can't be resolved in time, and you wind up with a reduced or higher cost supply running into fairly stable and strong demand.
Great. Well, thank you, George. And it doesn't look like we have any further questions. So I would like to thank Beatrice and George from the Center for contributing to those MAP articles and talking with us today about them, and Ricardo for joining us. Really great information on the work that you guys are doing and the value you bring to companies in Mexico. And stay tuned for additional map talks in the future. We'll post those on the map website, and they're always in our map newsletter. So if you're not already signed up for our newsletter, I encourage you to do that. You can go to the map website, sign up at the bottom. It's just your name and your email, and we send out a newsletter typically once a week with events and updated data and future articles that we have on the map dashboard. So a great way to stay up to date on everything that we're doing. So thank you for joining us today, and thank you for everyone's time.